Welcome to our fourth annual Sonja Luehrmann Memorial Talk. I am Yıldız Atasoy, Professor of Sociology in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Simon Fraser University. And I am hosting this event on behalf of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I would like to thank the Department of for co-sponsoring this event together with us. I will also thank our support staff in the department, Gina Pearson, Esther Wong, and Sylvia Chow for facilitating this event, helping us out with this. Before we start our presentation, I would like to acknowledge that we are hosting this event on the unceded lands of indigenous peoples of the region. This talk is recorded, will be recorded. If you don't wish your faces to show on our recording, I would like, please turn off your cameras. Please write your questions on the chat box. We will read your questions at the end of the presentation. Yeah, and I would like to say a few words about our Jeffrey Players. He is a professor of sociology at the Catholic University of Leuven. I don't think I pronounced it very well though, in Belgium. And he is also the current president of International Sociological Association. His research focuses on social movements, global studies, Latin America, religion, among very wide, as you see, a very wide coverage of global issues he is dealing with. And actually, the religion is not his necessarily main focus of research, but I asked him whether he could consider linking his talk on religious issues, given the fact that our dear friend Sonja's focus was on anthropology of religion, and Jeffrey was gracious enough to acknowledge that and accommodate my request on this. He has many published books and articles, and I'm not going to go over them right now, but I will just mention one book. It's called After Globalization, Becoming Actors in the Global Age. The one notable book that I wanted to mention about. And the latest article he published called Global Sociology as a Renewed Global Dialogue, and it was published this year in Global Dialogue Journal. And before I say too much, I would like Jeffrey to begin his talk. Thank you so much for participating in our talk today.
Thank you very much. I just first start by sharing my screen. I prepared some PowerPoint for this occasion. Can you see it?
You don't see it very well. It's half broken, Jeffrey.
Excuse me, it just worked out well. I have to. Oh, we just tried before, it used to work. Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Perfect. Well, let me put it in a widescreen. Okay, just leave it like that. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored to be with you virtually on this fourth annual Sonja Luehrmann Memorial Lecture. I think I really would like to thank the department for organizing this kind of event, and particularly Professor Atasoy for inviting me to share some research results, but also for joining you in commemorating the memory of one of your dear colleagues, Sonja Luehrmann. I didn't have the pleasure to know her personally, but those who knew her all told me about a woman who believed in a scholarly community and a spirit of constructive, critical, intellectual engagement. She was also a scholar whose research analyzed what lies behind social facts that were too fast discarded as mere ideology or belonging to the past. This is very connected to what I would like to share with you today, and especially what everyone who has told me about Sonja Luehrmann also mentions a colleague who was able to bring people together. So I'm so glad that thanks to the the Simon Fraser University, the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, and particularly thanks to Professor Atasol, Sonja Luehrmann is once again able to bring us together today, and I am so honored to be able to commemorate her work and legacy. Before starting, I would also like to mention that maintaining this talk does not mean I don't stand in solidarity with the TSSU and the non-faculty teaching colleagues who are on strike in the university. And yes, so can you just confirm that you see my slides? Sorry. Thank you. So the aim of this talk is actually to try to draw some lessons from a specific case on religion and politics, which is Brazil. One of the most exciting but also frightening case. And my conviction is that what happened to Brazil is, of course, always specific to a specific country, but can also happen in any other country. I would like to focus on a few lessons, intellectual academic lessons, that can reproduce in different countries too. I think this will be better. So that basically all over during my talk, I would like to stress 4 lessons, 4 learnings that I took from the case of Brazil, and I will come back to that in the conclusion, but just so that you can keep it in mind. The first one is that religion is not only on the political right, it was also very active on the left in Brazil. The second point is that religion is a battlefield. But this battlefield is not a battle between evangelists on one side and Catholics on the other. It is actually a conflict. There is a conflict between progressive and reactionary movements that runs through each and every church. This is actually what we see this very week in the Vatican with this meeting they have there. So evangelist is not the right unit of analysis when it comes to politics. This is what we'll try to show. The third point is that if, as the title of this talk mentions, it's about politics and power, but it's also about culture and eschatology. We should not forget what lies behind. These changes, there are also important changes in the interpretation of the Gospels. And finally, the importance of seeing change, and particularly social change, in a long-term perspective, which is something we don't do as much in social movement studies. So with that, you're all familiar with this man now, Jair Bolsonaro. He took over the presidency, was elected president of Brazil in 2018 with very strong support evangelical community. And it was quite a surprise because Brazil used to be not only a Catholic stronghold, but a stronghold of the most progressive Catholic tendency, liberation theology. So how was it possible to move so fast from liberation theology to the political power of reactionary religious actors? And here you can see here in this slide the fact that the evangelists in 2018, they voted much more for Bolsonaro, the right-wing candidate, than for the left-wing candidate Haddad. There was a difference of more than 11 million votes, which is actually more than the total difference of votes between 2 candidates. So it is a number that seems to show that the evangelists were the one who elected Bolsonaro. I will come back to that and nuance it a bit. But it was basically, we saw the same percentage, almost the same percentages in the latest election, 2022, between Lula, who won, and Bolsonaro. While for the evangelists, it was about the same. 65% here voted for Bolsonaro. So a very strong support. The question is Bolsonaro really the president, was he the president of the neopentecostals, of the reactionary religious actors? Here, first of all, I have to stress that the religious factors is not the only factor. There are plenty of factors that may explain partly the success of the extreme right in Brazil after several governments run by the left. But at the same time, what happened to Brazil cannot be understood without the deep transformation that took place in the religious field since the 1980s. We cannot explain it all with what happened in the last few years. We have to go back to some transformation in the 1980s, and this is what I will tell you about. Especially, so here I took two pictures. The first one with Bolsonaro. He's just at the beginning of his 2018 victory speech, there was a blessing passed by a neopentecostal pastor and senator, Magno Malta, that you see here with the mic on the right of Bolsonaro. And so the religion was really so present immediately in the very first victory speech. So this seems to be very super conservative right wing. But a few months ago, when the opposite candidate, Lula, won the election from the left wing Workers' Party, he started his victory speech by these words. First of all, I would like to thank God. So he's also the product of partly the product of religion. He grew up in a religious context and he learned a lot from that. And he's still a very religious person. Even more, just 1 week before the second turn of the election, he wrote a letter of commitment towards the evangelicals. In this letter, he notably says, right, I declare my respect and admiration for the faith, dedication, and love with which evangelicals carry out their mission, whether in the area of spreading the gospel or in the area of social assistance, protection of children, youth, women, the elderly, and disabled. Likewise, the participation of evangelicals in the various forms of social participation in governments is welcome. So this is surprising. We tend to associate evangelicals, active religious actors in politics, with the right wing. But here we have left-wing candidate trying to writing a letter of commitment. And just after that, it also reinstates his personal opposition to abortion, which is, of course, one of the main, it's on the top of the agenda of these right-wing conservative religious actors. So the panorama is far more complex than seeing the religious actors supporting far-right candidates, reactionary candidates. It's far more complex than that in Brazil and I would claim in any different parts of the world. And so, as I said a few minutes ago, if we want to understand what happened in Brazil in the last few years with this rise of the political influence of religious actors, well, we may have to go back 40 years before and seeing the landslide transformation that shook the country. Not shook, actually, it was a progressive transformation. No one really noticed it a lot. But in 1980, Brazil was the stronghold of Catholic religion. 89% of the population declared itself Catholic, and only 6.6% were historical evangelists. Historical evangelism or Lutheran, neopentecostal churches were almost not present in Brazil in 1980. It was not only a stronghold of Catholicism, it was a stronghold of the very left of the Catholic Church with liberation theology. I'll tell you a bit more about it later. And just 36 years later, which is not so much in terms of religious transformation, only 50% of Brazilian people were Catholics and 29% were evangelists. Among them, 22% were neopentecostals. There were almost no neopentecostal in 1980. And so this has obviously a direct impact on, no, not obviously, this had a direct impact on the political field, but it is not that obvious as it looks. So let me first give you some background on the other side, the left-wing theology of liberation theology. That was really so important in Brazil. Between the 1950s and the 1980s. Very, to summarize it very, very shortly, it's an interpretation of the gospel that gives a preferential option for the poor. Not only does it take very much care about the poor, but it says that the poor should be the actors of their own emancipation, and that if they are poor, it is because of the capitalist system. So if you want to help the poor, you have to change, transform, stop the capitalist system. And this was also part of the resistance of the part of the Brazilian church during the dictatorship. Some of them were inspired by Marxism as an analysis, and it was a very solid intellectual and theological trend within the Catholic, but also the Protestant churches. In 1980, there were 50,000 basic ecclesiastic communities. These are groups of between 20 and 100 families each, who get together once or twice a week, mostly in popular neighborhoods, and what they do is to discuss the scripture, to discuss what the gospel means in their daily life, and to develop solidarity action, to protest also against the unfair political and economic system. And what happened there is that these basic ecclesial communities and other forms of religious groups connected to liberation theology became incubators of a new culture of activism and politics. What they did in these groups of families is popular education. People learn to read, to write, to discuss in public the Gospels, the text. It was very much inspired by Paulo Freire pedagogy. It was part of this movement. They were also very active in promoting more horizontal relations in the church, in the groups, where the priests were just one among the group. And this contrasted with the vanguardism of the communist activists in Brazil that were very hierarchical. So, and what we also see in the analysis of these religious groups is a very strong concern for the self, the importance given to the human dimension, taking into account, I quote here, the affective dimension and the human person as such. This is something very similar to the form of activism we see in many movements today. And so what happened in Brazil is that they became the basic ecclesial communities became the incubators not only of a new culture, but also of generations of activists and new social movements. There's some statistics there to show the connection between the Workers' Pastoral and the PT, the Workers' Party. Lula, current president himself, was a member of one of these groups, the Workers' Pastorals. What happened is that from the basic ecclesial communities, they said that people should get involved to make the world a better place, to make the world a place that is fair, not less unequal. But they should do so not by joining Christian parties, Catholic parties, or Catholic unions. They should do so by joining social movements, joining parties, but not confessional parties. It is exactly what happened. It's a great book by Brazilian sociologist Elias Saré. He showed how, in the 1980s, there were a range of new social movements that took a big role in liberating the country from the dictatorship and went on. Urban movements, the big landless people movements, peasants, the biggest trade union, Kut, and of course the Workers' Party, all came up, all had a massive protagonism, agency from people that were trained in these ecclesiastic basic communities. It was the same in the 2000 with the World Social Forum that met 4 times in Brazil, or the Solidarity Economy networks. So my point here is that this liberation theology that was very active until the mid-1980s transformed Brazil 15, 20 years later, when these people came to power in the government and in many movements. But then the question is, what happened? How is it possible that the country is so much moved by left-wing theology, and today, in just 3 decades, there was such a rise of reactionary religious actors? Well, I think there are at least 5 elements of explanation. I'll quickly go through them. The first one is that in the 1980s, there was a major religious shift with 2 concomitant evolutions. One is the Vatican, Rome, the Catholic Church, attacks against liberation theology, and then this was really a very strong, it led to a very strong decline of liberation theology and its influence. And at the same time, the concomitant, not directly connected, but a concomitant event, the rise of conservative neopentecostal churches that took over the space left over in a popular neighborhood, the space left over by the decline of the progressive Catholics. So what happened? I go very briefly through that. A conservative turn in the Vatican had a massive impact in Latin America. When John Paul II came to Vatican, he decided to attack more and more the left-wing trends in the church, and particularly liberation theology, because they were accused of being Marxist and defending communists. And he was a Polish pope, so he didn't like communists at all. And so there were a series of texts, a series of sanctions, but also they cut resources allocated to local progressive parishes. So there was something, and also they promoted a moral agenda. And when these Catholics, or neopentecostal religious actor, conservative religious actor, talk about morality, actually they talk about sexuality most of the time, as if morality was just reduced to sexuality. Even the very concept of agenda is not an invention of the neopentecostal churches. It's an invention of the Vatican, with Ratzinger publishing a text on that in 1997. So one factor is the conservative turn on the Vatican that both destroys partly liberation theology in Brazil and in Latin America, and open space for the neopentecostal evangelists that were just at the very same time arriving massively in Latin America. And they immediately occupied the new popular neighborhoods. Among the problem is for the Catholic Church that they could not open churches, parishes in all the new neighborhoods of the cities at the time of fast industrialization. So there was a massive migration, rural urban migration in Brazil. Many millions of people joining the suburbs of Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, and the Catholic Church was absent there. The only one who were there were the liberation theology, but they were ripped out by the hierarchy of the Catholic Church. And so at that time, neopentecostal evangelists started with a very similar mission of popular education, learning people to write, to read, and also economic support networks, developing small businesses for women, and they were very active and successful in this neighborhood. At the same time, they became more and more active building mega churches with dozens of thousands of attendants, and they took over some mass media. Today, the second largest conglomerate of television is in Brazil, belongs to the Universal Church of the Christ. So we saw since the 1980s a massive rise of neopentecostal evangelists. However, my argument seems a bit counterintuitive, is that the rising political success is not so much due to the rise of the numbers the growing numbers of neopentecostals. It is much more about transformation in theology, in the relationship to politics. Because before that, they were most evangelical, small Protestant. They didn't want to mix with politics. It was a rule that if evangelical, if a Protestant wanted to join politics, he would not have the support of his church. This happened until the 1980s. And then there was a big change promoted by a series of leaders of some of these evangelical churches. My point here is to say, okay, that it is important to see the rising numbers of neopentecostal churches and believers, but there is something much more important, is the change in the interpretation of the Bible. This basically we could discuss a bit more in depth, but two theological innovation, more or less. One that happened everywhere in the world, but it landed in Brazil in the 1990s and 2000. First one is a prosperity theology. Basically, very basically, it means that if God blesses you, He'll bless you entirely, and so He gives you material and economic success. So which means it is a very big change in the relationship to success, money, and economy for within the Protestant church. Because before that, Protestants were actually not all Protestants believed that the economic success was due to God. On the opposite, they were much more living in a much poorer, or they were ascetics. And this theology of prosperity, actually resonates very much with the spirit of neoliberalism that also came to Brazil. At the same time, in the same years, let's say, a bit later, another trend was the theology of the kingdom. This invites believers to actively work for the restoration of the kingdom of God on earth. So, before that, most Protestants didn't engage in politics because they say religion, we have to implement religion in our daily life. But then, the theology of the kingdom, it meant that it forces many believers, and especially many in the hierarchy of the churches, to get into the political arena. It's a political commitment. It is a believer's responsibility to bring about God's kingdom in this world, and not waiting for the world after death. So this is notably one of Eddie Macedo, the most influential theologian, neopentecostal theologian in Brazil, and the founder of one of the most important neopentecostal church in Brazil, wrote a book about the title is The Plan to Power, God, the Christians, and the Politics. So, yes, my point here is basically to say that we have to look behind the numbers. What matters are, of course, the growing number of neopentecostals, but even more, this transformation of the relationship to politics. Then another factor also seems quite counterintuitive, is the fact that today, in the last 10 years, the neopentecostal reactionary actors blame all the evil on the Workers' Party. They said it was so bad for Brazil, for believers. But actually, if you look closely, the period of rise of political rise and of religious rise of the Neopentecostals was precisely during the governments run by the Workers' Party. Since the very first Workers' Party government in 2003, led by the President Lula, there were ministers, there were secretaries coming from the Neopentecostal churches. They also took an active role in organizing social benefit programs in Brazil. Then, 1 decade later, they had some very important success, like the Pastor Marcelo Crivella became a minister, a very reactionary person, became a minister under the government of Dilma Rousseff. So all of the period of the Workers' Party ruling, there was only a rise of Neopentecostal ministers, pastors in the government. And they had some really massive victory in the parliament too. For example, in 2013, a very radical homophobic pastor was elected to chair the Human Rights Commission, which is quite a huge problem in Brazil with the LGBT movement. It was quite strong at that time. Meanwhile, we also saw a rise of what they call the evangelist caucus. So there is not one evangelical party, but there are evangelists, and notably reactionary evangelists, in all parties, in most of the parties. And then they gather to defend the common position mostly on sexuality, basically. And they had also increasing success in the election. What happened in Brazil is that for any government to pass some policy, they need to make an alliance between different small parties in the parliaments. And for that, the Workers' Party very often counted on an alliance with the reactionary religious actors that supported social policy. So if the left wanted to pass social policy, social benefit programs, then they could count on the support of some allies that were reactionary religious actors. The issue is that in many cases, the bargaining chip, what they give in exchange of the support for social policy was issue connected to gender. So in many cases, when the conservative evangelical deputies and senators came together, representatives came together, they managed to cancel initiatives on gender issues in Brazil. We'll not develop that, but really want to stress the importance of gender as a battlefield very early on. It's nothing new in Brazil. It was already the case 15 years ago and much before. And always the left didn't consider it. The left-wing government didn't consider it as crucial. So they were okay to leave a bit out, to yield on issues that were central for the conservative agenda on sexual issues or issues connected to sexuality, and in exchange of support for social policy. So in the famous letter I mentioned, the letter of commitment to the evangelists that again President Lula wrote just 1 week before the election, he notably writes, it was in our governments, the Workers' Party governments, that the churches grew the most, mostly the evangelical ones. This is very true, and he takes it as success. But then this leads me to a question that is not only valid for Brazil, but that we see in Mexico and many different countries. How far is the rise of evangelist, reactionary political actors a legacy of the Workers' Party governments and of some left-wing governments, as it is today the case in Mexico and different countries? So by then I don't mean that Lula or the next president, Dilma Rousseff from the Workers' Party, they didn't want they didn't want to support the rise of reactionary religious actors. It was just an unintended consequence of their own policy. And finally, we saw the weight of the neopentecostal leaders, mostly leaders, in the campaign, the electoral campaign that led to the victory of extreme right politician Jair Bolsonaro in 2018. The mass media were very important, but also social media, and a direct connection between the neopentecostal pastors and ministers with the people from the church. And Bolsonaro, very interestingly, he's not neopentecostal. He's Catholic, but it was rebaptized in the Jordan River in Palestine by a neopentecostal senator and pastor. So it's a mix of Catholics and neopentecostal. And finally, I would like to point out the fact that this political success goes much beyond Bolsonaro. The people believe, many people here in Brazil hope actually, that this what they call Bolsonarismo, this style, this authoritarian politics and very populist policies will stop after Bolsonaro is more or less out of the political game today. I don't share this perspective for three reasons. One is that there was a very strong accumulation of resources and political entrenchment during all this period, during the last 20 years, during the Workers' Party governments, but also during Bolsonaro governments. Many other reactionary religious actors had a massive success in politics. We had a mayor of Rio de Janeiro, who was a very authoritarian and conservative pastor of a neopentecostal church. They managed the second main conglomerate of television. They managed also they've managed to set the issues and perspective in a political agenda. And as the liberation theology was able to train new generation of activists that would transform Brazil later on, this is exactly what happened with on the other side with neopentecostal reactionary churches. And here's yes, and yes. So I think what is important here to see is that it's not only about the rise of political actors; it's about new articulations, new combinations between religious actors, politics, and social movements. It is a long-term project. They've been on the rise for 4 decades, and it is also that's also important. It is not primarily a political project. Shortcut political analysis would say, okay, they had their wish, they aim when Bolsonaro came to power. They had a right-wing, authoritarian, religious person as a president. But that's not the case. What they want is not to have the Brazilian presidency. They want a moralization of society. So for them, it's the beginning. By then, I would like to stress that the political success, it's not only about political success, it's a cultural transformation in Brazil that will not stop after Bolsonaro. And in that, it is actually surprising to see so many similarities between the left-wing liberation theology in until the 80s and the prosperity theology that's after 2010. These are two opposite interpretations of the Gospels. One is against capitalism with poor, and the other one is very favorable to capitalism. But at the same time, they have some similarities. These are spiritualities that encourage the actors to engage in the public space in the name of their faith and to implement a vision of the world. They want to make the kingdom of God on earth. They just have very different visions of this kingdom of God. These are also theological trends that led to create, to foster, to train new political actors, activists, movements, parties came out of that. Which, if we take it in a long-term perspective, on one side, it's fascinating. How is it that a theological trend that was more or less stopped in the 1980s, managed to transform Brazil 2.5 decades afterwards, when the actors, the people that were trained in this context, in these small communities, the basic ecclesiastic communities, they were trained there, but they came to power, to the government in Brazil in the 2000s. So how strong is this personal transformation, these religious trends that managed to train actors that transformed the country 25 years afterwards? But there's no reason it is not the same on the other side. The way people are trained, have been trained in conservative neopentecostal churches is very similar, and it's also this is the incubator. This is the breeding ground of many actors that will transform Brazilian politics, society, and culture over the next decades. So it's definitely not something that will stop when Bolsonaro, after the presidency of Bolsonaro. And just to take some analytical lesson from that, to synthesis, which lessons? Which kind of analytical lessons could we take from the case of Brazil to better understand similar cases in different countries, and to better understand the disconnection between religion, movements, and politics is far more complex than it looks like. The third thing is that I think that evangelist is not a good unit of analysis. It's an easy one. It's difficult not to mention it that way to not to make it shock. I did it myself, telling you about evangelist neopentecostal. But the battle is not between evangelists that are like conservative, reactionary on one side and progressive Catholics. No, not at all. The conflict is between progressive and reactionary movements in every church. We see today in the Catholic Church with such a battle around the synod that is happening in Rome. There are conservative and progressive actors in the neo-Pentecostal churches among the evangelists, of course. So just look at the numbers I took I referred to tell you how important it was, how the evangelical vote had an impact on the election of Bolsonaro. It is true, of course. At the same time, look at the Catholics. They voted half and half. It was not like all the Catholics with the left, not at all. By then I mean that, of course, the Catholics are split between reactionary, authoritarian trends and some more progressive ones. It's the same for the evangelicals. If you, there's notably this Minister of the Environment in Brazil, Marina da Silva. She is also an evangelical believer. She's very active in her church. And so it's important to stress that all the evangelical believers are not conservative. And on the opposite, the conservative Catholic sectors have played a major role in the success of Bolsonaro, but also in the conservative turn in Brazil. That's why evangelist is a false unit of analysis, is a wrong unit of analysis when it comes to social and political analysis. It may be a good one in terms of considering the churches, the evolution of religion, but in terms of social and political analysis, bringing the evangelists are really very diverse, and it's not a good unit. The second point is also to complexify it a bit, is that we have to go beyond the evangelical vote. It's not something like an obvious national confession vote. This idea that evangelical people vote for evangelical candidates, this was not the case before. This is something that has been constructed. And there's one of my colleagues, is also currently in Rio de Janeiro, Jose Luis Perez Guadalupe, shows very well that Brazil is actually one of the only Latin American countries where evangelical believers tend to vote more for candidates who are also evangelicals. But this is new. It didn't happen before 2010. So presenting the evangelical vote as a monolith, and as a block, this is misleading. It is a construct that only happened quite recently. That's why the evangelical vote is not a given fact. It's something constructed. It's something that the reactionary churches have built years after year for election after elections. Third elements, as that I stressed, is the fact that maybe the success of reactionary religious actors is a legacy of progressive governments. During the government of the Workers' Party in Brazil, but also during the current governments, this, let's say, social democrat, center-right, center-left governments in Mexico, we see how the conservative churches accumulate resources and political entrenchment. So when Lula say it was under our government that the churches grew most, especially evangelical ones, this is really a problematic legacy for many countries, not only for Brazil. The fourth, the other lesson is that we need to take a longer term perspective. We tend to see the latest success in a political arena, in election, but actually it's about political, social, and cultural change. They started 40 years ago, and it will last for decades more. The political dimension for these actors is not the main one. What they seek is a moralization of society. is this kingdom of God in their way. So for these actors, Brazil presidency, the fact that Jair Bolsonaro was the president of Brazil, is just the beginning. What they do is to train movements, actors, activists, and we have a series of very reactionary movements in Brazil and in Latin America today that are trained in this, that they come out of actors that were trained in this time. And finally, I also would like to stress, of course, that religion is not only an empirical right. There also is relation theology. Of course, religion played a major role also on the left wing. So this was the case of Brazil, but it is just a case study, and I think that the implication, the analytical implication, in particular lessons, are valid in many countries. First, because Brazil is actually exporting its interpretation of the gospel in many countries today, not only massively in Latin America and Africa, but also in, at least in European countries, in Belgium, France. There are many Brazilian neopentecostal churches today. It's also, as I said, the battlefield is inside every churches, and we see today a very strong battle within the Catholic Church. We see the battle in the Vatican these weeks, these months. This is Catholic symposium that gather different sides of the church in very harsh battle, very rude battle between different Catholic actors. And there's also, we saw it in the US, maybe more than any other country. This is happening within, this is also happening within the Catholic Church. We have a quote by Archbishop Vigano, who is one of the main opponents to the Pope Francis today. He's a Catholic Archbishop, and a few days before the last presidential election in the US, he wrote a letter to Donald Trump. And in this letter, you can see how the hate he has of the liberals and all the connection between some of these reactionary religious actors, including in the Catholic Church, and the conspiracy theorists, and I would say the white supremacists. So he wrote, the fate of the whole world is being threatened by a global conspiracy against God and humanity. The purpose of this great reset, actually a great reset, it refers to the lockdown during the against COVID pandemic. The purpose of the great reset is the imposition of a health dictatorship aiming at the imposition of liberticidal measures hidden behind tempting promises of ensuring a universal income and cancelling individual debt. In some countries, the Great Reset will be activated between the end of this year, 2020, and the first part of 2021. New blockades are planned for this, which will be officially justified by supposed second and third wave of the pandemic. So, just to come back to where I started, I think that when we read some of the brilliant article by Sonja Luehrmann, we see that what she tried to do is to analyze what lies behind social facts that are too far discarded as mere ideology or belonging to the past. As an anthropologist of religion, this is exactly what we need to do today in the sociology and anthropology of religion. These religion factors have been discarded because we believed that we are going toward a secular society, that they belong to the past. We see today in Brazil and in the world, which is not the case. I would also like to stress the fact that even the title of this talk, we insist on power and politics, but when it comes to right-wing religious actors, whether evangelists or Catholics, it's not only about power and politics. We also have to take into account theology and the change in the interpretation of the gospel. We have to take into account cultural change. This is the aim. It's not to the very aim is not to get to the presidency. It's to transform the culture of society. And in this perspective, we have to bring social movement in this relation between religion and politics. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for this very insightful and well thought out talk. And I really did appreciate a lot as well that you were able to include our the colleague and friend, close friend, Sonja's insights and work in your talk. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And also I would like to mention one more thing, which is very important, because as you know, I am originally from Turkey, and I follow Turkish politics quite closely and write and research on that context as well. That your focus about religion or religious, in your case, evangelical, but in Turkish case, Islamic, it doesn't go through one line of politics. It goes through a lot of lines of politics, and I really did appreciate that. So your talk was called right-wing politics. It was my invention, not necessarily yours, the title really. But I really appreciated that you were able to bring all this very complex the embeddedness of religion into politics in various different ways. So before I open the discussion in terms of the questions that we will receive from the audience, I would like to ask a question, if you don't mind, myself. That you said that in the 1980s, the Catholic Church has a very well thought out in the way attack to liberation theology, and then clearly it was very strong in the 60s, especially as a left-oriented movement in the South American context. But 1980s is also the time in global politics of transitioning to more neoliberal capitalistic reshaping of life, economic, society, etc. So in that sense, actually, I was wondering about, and before I ask my question, I also want to point out something. I mean, the Latin America or Brazil is a context for developmentalism, not necessarily a context for welfare capitalism, welfare state capitalism. And welfare state capitalism was a phenomenon for Western Europe and North America, Japan, Australia, etc., but not for the rest of the world. Given the fact that in the societies of global North, there was no a welfare state system. And then when they sort of attacked the liberation theology movement, and we are seeing these evangelical groups rising, how these evangelical groups were filling the gap in terms of social welfare programs, or whether or not they were filling any gap, or whether they were reshaping the meaning of welfare and welfare provisioning, and why they are so strong, especially among, it's not a class issue. I'm not trying to say that. It is definitely not a social class issue, but why are they so appealing for many people from all political spectrums? And it's a big question. I'm aware of that, but I will. It will be nice to talk about talk about this, given that it's happening everywhere in the world, really.
Thank you. Of course, this is a very important question, as you said, for everywhere in the world. I want to say that once again here, Brazil brings us very interesting case where it went faster and more in depth than in other countries. Because as you rightly said, it was a context of development based on capitalism. Form of capitalism was definitely with a less social state, almost non-social state. In this context, we see in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, massive migration from rural areas, rural states to industrial neighborhoods and cities like Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro. In that, the families, like the family of the current president, Lula, who moved from the north of Brazil to the south of Brazil, they are stranded there without help, with very often also problems in single mother families because of the break of social bonds that comes from that. They move from small, poor rural communities to huge cities with a very limited system of welfare state, schools, learning. And this is where civil society and the church and the churches were able to provide popular education and sense of belonging, a sense also of solidarity. whether on the left wing or on the conservative side. And particularly, what was also so important was social capital. They knew each other, they trusted each other, and that's how you can start a small business. You rather buy a small thing to a corner shop of someone you know than someone you don't know. And it was crucial, notably, not only, I would say even more for women and for men. To when there was a problem, you can turn to the church to get some help, to help your kid to go to school, but also just to make basic business that became then larger business. Because especially in the right wing version of the neopentecostal, of course they help a lot women to make small business, but actually this was the same. Small business was the same in the more liberal and progressive Catholics, because it's important for women to have some earnings. And here, once again, it's where we see some similarities. It's just that they were oriented toward different aims and justified by different interpretations. But popular education, solidarity, social capital, when the state is not there, the churches were able to provide it. And this is what made a success. And it's again what we see also, I think, in Turkey recently with with many of the provinces. You're right to say that Turkey is a very interesting case. I haven't mentioned it because I would be afraid to make mistakes, as you know the case much better than I do. But definitely, this is something. Turkey is a very interesting country to analyze it and to show that the same religion is actually there are actors. There are very different actors in the same religion, and it's not. What I would say that we saw religious actors also in Gezi Park. There are also progressive religious actors in Turkey, maybe less today than it used to be 10 years ago. But it's not that religion is only on the side of the conservative authoritarian party. No, it's also on the other side.
Thanks so much, yeah, for your answer. And any question from the audience? Well, I have another question. Go ahead, Molly.
Yeah, I think we do have one by Gabby in the chat. I can read it out. It says, "Thank you for this lecture. I am Gabriella. I am Brazilian and I am pursuing a master's in religion in Sweden. My scope of study is the influence of evangelical churches in Brazilian politics. I wonder if you have thoughts on dominion theology when it comes to right-wing movements from evangelical pastors that are elected in Brazil. Also, do you believe that the current party in presidency, the Workers' Party, will cause a stronger right-wing stance on the next election or even for local elections?"
I wouldn't like to. Actually, I would like to learn much more from you and to read your work on this dissertation here. I'm not. You're probably you're definitely a better expert on the internal dispute and evolution of this dominion theology. What I wouldn't like to do too much is to maybe to take to balance a bit what I said before. Of course, here I insisted on the role of religion in politics. I wouldn't like to give the impression that this is only one side of it. Religion is only one of the factors that may explain the success of Bolsonaro. It's an important part of Brazilian public space today and of success of a party or another, but there are many other factors. And the next election cannot be predicted only by looking at the religion. It has an influence. How much, we don't know exactly. So, of course, I would say that as it was the purpose of this talk, I insist a lot on the impact of the religious factors, but then it mixes with many other issues. Even for the election of Bolsonaro, it was, of course, it helped a lot to have the support of so many neopentecostal leaders. At the same time, there was a set of other phenomena, including the decline of the progress of the Workers' Party, the decline of Brazilian economy, social networks, many other issues. So religion is just one is an important factor, but that combines with other factors. That's why I think that it's far too early to see what may happen in the next election, especially Brazil is a federal country and local elections are very different. What we tend always to see is the top. But if you look at the 2018 elections in Brazil, it was really interesting too, because not only Bolsonaro was elected, but in the same election, Brazilian people never elected as many Black women in different parts of organization from the state, local, state, and national elections. So it's not that you have on one a full success on the right wing, extreme right in election. You also have at the same time very progressive evolutions in Brazil, which makes it really impossible to predict.
I think we have a question on the chat box. Would you like to read that?
Sure, yeah. So Raj Sheep is wondering, how do indigenous religions or spiritual beliefs fit into this picture? Do they matter? Do they have a voice to the politicians in Brazil? I assume they are overshadowed by the Christian voices in Brazil.
Definitely, they are overshadowed by the Christian voices, because the Christian voices, and mostly, I would say not any, the neopentecostal reactionary leaders were very strategically efficient in getting their voices heard. They not only they are the influential in the mainstream media, they bought the media and made it mainstream. So it's not that their voice is heard, the media is theirs. So there's a big difference. So at the same time, well, the indigenous have, of course, a much stronger voice today in the government of Lula. There's an important minister of indigenous affairs who is herself an indigenous, and very recently there was a judiciary victory from the indigenous people. Now the religious belief is important in Brazil, but still it's limited to I think it was 4 or 5% of the believers that have animism or other form of religiosity. Indigenous people are, as in many parts of the world, have not part of them they have developed different kind of beliefs, but also indigenous people are also massively going to neopentecostal churches. There are especially those who join the cities. They are also part of this. Some of them are you will find them in the neopentecostal churches, and some, of course, in the Catholic churches, both progressive and reactionary.
I would like to ask another question because in your answer to my question, you focused on the importance of trust and social capital formation. I believe they are really important notions that they are very important notions. Yeah, and people, when they go to elections, vote, or think about issues from a politically, they don't have only religion in mind. They have all kinds of other issues in mind when they organize their political involvement, really, in various ways. However, again, from a comparative perspective, if you use the Turkey as an example, just an example, really, but we can find other examples from other places as well. In the last elections, there was a lot of economic issues, high inflation, social housing issues, food prices going up 78% in 1 year, input prices going up hundreds of percent, etc., etc. And everyone in the world, including the journal called Economist, expected that the opposition, which declared itself as a secular party, will win. Everybody expected that, right? But it didn't work out that way. Quite the contrary, actually. The ruling party win the election with great majority. The funny thing, interesting thing is that so-called secular party of the opposition was apologizing from people for the past events that actually they were supporting the headscarf in Turkey. So in other words, they were trying to make inroads into religious sensitivities of the people through that way, but it didn't work because people didn't trust that party. It's my theory on this. People did not trust that actually this party can be trustworthy to vote for. So could you elaborate on this, on the importance of how trust and trustworthiness work in a way that actually certain groups gain more than others? And what does secularism mean in that context, really?
No, Professor Tassari, I'm not sure I can reply to your question because I remember very well our very first exchange when you invited me to this lecture. We discussed briefly, and I told you that many of my friends and colleagues in Turkey were so depressed and so surprised about the result of the election. And you told me, I'm not so much, because you saw the other side. And this refers to something I would like to stress here, is that there are far more secularist people among analysts and sociologists, mostly progressive sociologists, than there are in population. And in this perspective, for too long, we have been blind, and maybe in North America less than in Europe. We've been blind to religion, and we have believed that these were phenomena, I have to take Sonja words again, that these were phenomena, social fact, that we could discard as mere ideology and belonging to the past. That's what she showed with these Orthodox women. And this is exactly that. Sociology, religion was taken out of social movement studies in a way that I can believe. In the main journal in Europe, Social Movement Studies, there's not even one article that mentioned religion in the 20 years. When I submitted this previous version of the text that the talk I presented you today to the journal, they just replied, this has nothing to do with social movements and politics. So because this secularist view, it's not a matter of if you believe or not, but religion matters a lot to people. Not only about politics, it's about trust, it's about what they want in society, it's about culture. So I think that we have overseen it for too long, and it's very important to bring it back in to, you know it much more in North America, they know it much better in the US, that we are not going to a totally secular society. At the same time, it doesn't mean that this secularist trend doesn't exist. In Brazil, the main change in the religion's data in the past 15 years is not the most percentage of change. It's not the rise of neopentecostal. They say rise, but there's even a stronger rise of non-believers, atheists, secularization. So this exists, but it doesn't mean that a major part of the population is still among the believers, and too many analysts tend to forget it, and that actually politics is not only about economics arguments, it's not only about data, it's about identity too. Of course, we all know that, and and religion is part of it. There are actually many research to be done. One on how is it people vote, why, but another research on sociologists, anthropologists, political scientists who analyze the phenomena and tend to forget about it. And then they say, okay, we are not like the people. We were all together, all around me, no one was voting in that way. But then because we also sometimes we tend to forget that, and this is why, if you believe it or not, it is important to bring religion back in our analysis, and at the same time to understand that when you bring religion back in social movement and politics, religion is not first and foremost about politics. It's about the cultural transformations of a religion. It takes politics as one of the battlefield, one of the grounds for a transformation of society that for them goes beyond that. So we have to take it in political analysis without forgetting some specificity of religion. That's why I insist a bit on, I'm not an expert in theology, but I try to learn some of that, but it's important to, once again, if you're a believer or not, to have an idea of some recent transformation theology, because they have an impact in our world, whether you belong to this religion or not.
Thank you so much. I think, Molly, there is a question on the chat box.
Yes, we have a next one. This one's from Ilya. First starts by saying thank you for the insights, Dr. Players. Is there some evidence these days of the evangelicals who have supported Bolsonaro now being disillusioned with him and what he has done to their country? Thank you.
I think you there. Yeah.
We still, yes, sorry. We still need to wait a bit more for that, because this is all, it's not that new, but now it has been, well, about 10 months, a bit more than 10 months, and to see the change is changed. But there are, once more, we cannot take it as a block. There were very different reactions by pastors and church elites. Just after the election, when they found out, because they, on that side of the political arena and religious arena, they were totally convinced that Bolsonaro would win the election. And the people, some pastors frame Lula as evil. And so what was interesting then is that once he was elected, most of them, even some of the most virulent ones, accepted the result and stopped talking about evil. So they accepted the victory of Lula. And so this is, for me, it was quite a surprising transformation, but more obvious in their perspective. So I say, okay, some of that say, for example, we have to respect democracy, we have to have that. And some said, okay, God wants to prove us, want to put us on a proof to live in a country dominated by a communist leader, which is not true. It's not a communist at all, but that's how they frame it. They say we have to respect that. But also, it's just so interesting to see this letter of commitment to the evangelical from Lula, because he knew he could not win if the bloc of evangelical was too strong. And at the end, with the commitment, some evangelicals stopped seeing him as evil, and of course, some of these changed their perspective. Not that they would vote for him, but at least see him differently. Especially because this was also problematic on the left. Many people on the left thought he went too far with them, especially when he expressed his own personal opposition to abortion. He said, abortion is not a matter of the president. The president doesn't decide. It's a matter of the parliament. I will respect what the parliament decides. But personally, I am against abortion based on my faith. So, I mean, in this perspective, the opposition is less strong. At the same time, it's not only about politics. These people are trained, they're developing on the ground a different vision of Brazil, a different vision of society. They are against secularization, of course. They want, they still want to make Brazil a Christian country. And just so the strategy today of these people is as now Bolsonaro, because of an attempt of a coup d'etat, that he was mastermind of attempts of a coup just after the Lula took over power in January. So he cannot be a candidate anymore for the next election, at least until 2030. But now all the evangelical, they tried to put his wife as a next candidate. And she is a very strong believer and a very hardline evangelical. So not later than yesterday or the day before, she was part of this trial on the attempt of coup. And she just said to the person, I forgot the name, the prosecutor, she said to the prosecutor, your criticisms are not relevant and should not be done because you are not a believer, you are an atheist. So it shows how this habit of being a believer, it was just incredible in the context of Brazil, but now it becomes something that people say it's tolerated. By that I mean, definitely, they haven't stopped. Not all evangelicals. There are evangelical people on the left wing. There are many also right-wing evangelical believers that respect for the constitution and the separation between the government and the religion, but the transformation of Brazil and the transformation of its relation, of the relation between religion and the public sphere in Brazil is going on.
Thank you for answering that. We have another question from Gabby. It's kind of a twofold, a question and then a comment. So the question starts with, this might be a naive question, but do you believe, is there anything that should be done to avoid this polarization of political ideologies in the context of religion, or at least this idea of morality that some religions seem to pursue? And then the comment that follows up is, the idea of communism in schools seems to have spread in neopentecostal churches in the last few years as well. So there has been an increase of ideological polarization between a younger generation, and academic debates seem to be condemned by popular communities and older generations.
Well, first of all, thank you, Gabby, for this question. And please send me an email so that we're in touch and I can read some of your work. This would be very interesting. For me, I definitely have many things to learn from that. So please be in touch. On this question that just disappeared, so I cannot see them all anymore. But yes, there's a comeback of the anti-communist discourse. That said, it has not the same appeal as it had during the Cold War of the 1980s. Today, what appeals to the population is this what they call morality, what is actually sexuality issues. So against same-sex marriage and against abortion. This is the thing that mostly mobilize people. And here's also where it's not only about, it's not like political parties in the population, social movements have a big impact. And sometimes I'm fascinated and worried about the way it circulates. For example, you have arguments that are totally ridiculous but efficient, like against same-sex marriage. An argument started in Peru, Latin America. It was that the government would come and take your children to give them to homosexual families. Ridiculous. But this is kind of argument that mobilizes people, some people. And we saw exactly the same argument, that, at least as far as I could read, first appeared in Peru. We saw it, they used it 4 years ago in a campaign against same-sex marriage in Poland, in Europe. So it circulates very much here. And I would say that this is now much more than communist. Communist is still there. And they still blame Lula for being communist, which is definitely not true. But what is appealing, what makes votes, is actually much more the question of sexuality, same-sex marriage, and against abortion. The first question is also very important and doesn't have an answer, obviously. Gabby asked us what should be done to avoid polarization of political ideologies in the context of religion. But it's all the society is polarized. I spent most of my nights in the last weeks to try to get a statement of the ISA on this Israel-Gaza situation and academic freedom. You realize how much in every country almost there's a totally different media sphere and atmosphere, and people see totally different perspective on the same bombing. And this happened, of course, in every topics. So it's it's really a big question. And here I really admire the work that has been done in the US by Ali Hochschild, that you probably all know over there in Vancouver. Not only because in her book, famous book now, Strangers in Their Own Land, she went there. She spent time with a lot of respect, empathy, with people that were very, very extreme conservatives. And that she tried to understand them. This is something we have to do as sociologists. We cannot say, oh, I'm not a believer, religions from the past, we just forget it. We cannot do as if all these people are just stupid, that's why they are reactionary people. No, we have to understand them. It doesn't mean to share the argument. But what Ari Hochschild is doing today, I know that some other sociologists believe it's just impossible. If she tries to bring people together from the two sides of the political spectrum, that is quite extreme, sometimes white supremacist, together with liberal people in the US. It's maybe something that we should apply in sociology, anthropology, like bringing people together there. not always easy, but definitely the polarization is something that we need to work on. What I believe is that sociology, anthropology, political science, social sciences have a role to play in improving the analysis and diffusing it. When we see any problem, we should try to. Social sciences are against polarization at the end, against ideology. It shows the fact, it's contextualize it. We see it today on what happened in Gaza. When we see, well, we have a very important course training, what was the name, going on today with people from the university.
That's right.
We have to analyze things. We cannot stay with ideologies, and today we need to support the possibility of maintaining sociology in Palestine, where on the one side they are really very much opposed by actors. They are the radical actors. They are notably religious actors from some radical religious trends that hate sociology, of course, and especially women researchers. And on the other side, the Israel colonization oppression that just 3 weeks ago, so it's not new, entered the main Palestinian university. So sociologists are just caught between crossfire there, and they all oppose it. This is why it also shows us that sociological analysis, social science analysis are important. And this is maybe, I think that we work directly against polarization. It doesn't mean not to take side, because sometimes the facts leads you to develop analysis and then personally to take side, because you have this vision. But we need more objective data. We need to remember the past and not only to stay in very ideological media ecology today. Not only mainstream media, but also, of course, social media.
Well, if you don't mind, I would like to follow up on that.
Excellent.
This is a very important issue, I believe, given the fact that especially you are the president of International Sociological Association, and it is a great opportunity for us to talk. I teach a course, a graduate theory course, social theory course, and we talked a little bit about it last night in my class. The sociology is European. It began in Europe, and it's a European in the sense that actually from the origin, I mean. So it has its own biases of highly Eurocentric biases, as we see in the writings of Weber, Durkheim, Karl Marx, etc. And these are classical these people and their theories are foundational to classical sociological theory, and I do teach classical sociological theory. So following from that route, I mean, capitalist modernity, as it was elaborated in later years and 40s, 50s, 60s, etc., was dividing the world between modern world and traditional world. And traditional world had to change to be modern. And in the center of that definition of traditional, backward, underdeveloped was religion and culture. So I understand that now actually, and I completely agree with you, and then I'm a critical sociologist, and as you are as well. So this kind of mindset has been deeply rooted in sociological thinking, not only in North America or Western Europe, but also elsewhere as well. So, and we saw the reflection of this thinking in democratic social movements. Right. So at the moment, as far as I see, I do not see any social democratic movement really. That they are the remnants of the past and they are not appealing to people. So how it is possible then? I mean, we have some movements within sociology. However, coming from the classical perspective, from classical foundational perspective, how sociology needs to be changed, really, mindset, and it needs to change in a way that actually, without abandoning the classical roots, it can accommodate, it can change, it can be part of social change movement, because sociology is about social change. Otherwise, there's no point of doing sociology. I mean, you might as well go to doing business, really. You can make more money even. So if you don't want social change, there is no sociology. So how sociology now, in classical sociology, I mean, can help
Well, I share almost all your perspective. Only one thing I disagree with is that you see that sociology has to change. I agree with that. Don't just add sociology has changed a lot on these topics. It's just actually the theme of my first discourse as a president of the ISA, first speech. It will be published next week in our journal, Global Dialogue. It's called the 4 Transformations of Global Sociology. Really, I totally agree with you. This is something very important. Sociology is rooted in highly Eurocentric values and perspective. I don't agree that sociology begins in Europe. No, sociology is there in many different countries, but sociology was framed as beginning in Europe, as a movement towards secularization of society since the very beginning of this official sociology. And what happened in the way we consider religion in sociology is, of course, definitely rooted in that. I don't say that we have to get rid of all that. No, secularization exists. I just took the example of Brazil, but it's just a part of the story. We also need the other part. And in that, the way sociology treats religion in a very Eurocentric way is just one example of among so many others. Today, we have actually, I think we are going quite fast in the revision of the canons of sociology. When I was trained as a sociologist not so long ago, I never heard about Du Bois, about sociologists from Latin America. There were just 1 or 2, Cardoso, maybe that's it. And then I came to Latin America and I learned sociology from here, from Latin America, with a very different perspective. And Du Bois, it's indispensable. Everyone talks about Du Bois, except in my university. My university, you can just be trained in sociology for 5 years without naming Du Bois. So still we have a long way to go. But there is a deep transformation in sociology today. It's fascinating. Today, 20 years ago, global sociology was about expanding what we didn't name as Eurocentric, but it was Eurocentric sociology all over the world, with secularization and all that. Today, if you say global sociology, you immediately think about scholars from the global south. Immediately. We cannot understand a world, we cannot think a world without people from India, from Latin America. Look at our relationship with nature is in a deep and fast transformation, notably thanks to indigenous people and from Latin America, and then scholars who translate that. Really, I think that we are just in the midst of this transformation. In religion, the way the place of religion in sociology is just one of the examples of, as you said, deep root of sociology in a Eurocentric worldview. But we are just to unveil other cases, other histories of sociology, and definitely you cannot understand social movements. Not only today, what I showed social movements 20 years ago with the liberation sociology and all that. You cannot understand social movements in Latin American countries without religion. But then you take it from the global south. And then I go back to Europe and I see the same. I see that you cannot understand trade unions in Belgium without transformation that went to from the progressive religion in the 19th century. So it was there. It's just that we were blind to it. We have to question, we have to analyze. Sociologists and social scientists, blindness to many phenomena. And very often, when we look at that in the global south with our colleagues from the global south, then you see it, and then you go back. I go back to Europe, and I see it there too. So that's why we need much more dialogue among sociologists. Definitely, Turkey, Brazil are specific countries, specific histories. But we have so much to learn from them because what happened there actually reflects also global trends, which is why we need to understand much better what's happening, not only in the last Turkish election, but in all the phenomena. It's possible that a party like the AKP in such a secular country has such a success today.
Thank you so much for your comments and engagement in these the issues. Do we have another question? Do you see it, Molly?
No, I don't think so at this time.
Okay. Then I think we can end this discussion for now. If you don't mind, if you don't have any questions, do you have any question, Molly?
I had one originally that I can pull back from the conversation. I was just wondering, during your presentation, you mentioned that presenting the evangelical vote as a monolith and a block is misleading, which makes a lot of sense. And I was just wondering, from kind of the narrative that was kind of developed out of that from journalism, is that kind of what came about? Was there a push for viewing this one group as a monolith, and was there benefits to kind of projecting that to the global, in a global context, in that position, or was there kind of like a like fight back in from that in a journalist take? Does that make sense?
I wouldn't say that they were interested by people to do it, but it's just an easy explanation, which is not. I mean, it's one way to interpret the data. So I don't claim it's totally. It's true that more evangelical people voted for Bolsonaro than Catholic people or atheists. That's true. But it brings together people that are actually very different. But it's also, and especially, it avoids, it beats you to see the real tension and conflicts, which is not evangelicals against Catholics or atheists, but reactionary evangelist Catholics against progressive evangelical Catholics. Especially, you see there's a very strong battle within the churches. I read an abstract here from a Catholic archbishop, but you see also that one of my colleagues here, Roniti Buriti, a Brazilian sociologist, shows that the current reactionary actors among the evangelical churches could not exist without a series of strong attacks against progressive evangelical actors. So there's really a battle in that, and I would just say that it's not a block. When you consider it as a block, you don't see the main positions in this religious and cultural and political battle about reactionary and progressive. This is actually connected to 20 years ago, or even a bit more. It was a French Brazilian, very good sociologist of religion, Michael Louis. He published a book about the liberation Christianism, as he called it, as a social movement within the church, Catholic Church, and the Protestant churches. So we call it a social movement. What I claim is just there's also a social movement on the other side that crosses different churches.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Jeffrey. This was very, very engaging, thoughtful, and I really enjoyed this talk. I'm sure others did as well. Thank you so much for your efforts. And then, yeah, thank you. There's a question. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you so much for inviting me here. I was so pleased to share this perspective from Brazil with you, and I'm sure Professor Atasoy that I hope to learn more from your studies on the case of Turkey. We have many, I think it resonates here. And also, once again, I was very pleased that you and your department set up something to honor the memory of our colleague, Sonja Luehrmann. This is really important. I hope it will be more. We are a community of sociologists, and a community of sociologists or anthropologists is also a community of human beings. And so we're just not people who write, but people who bring people together. This is a really important part of her work, as far as I could read. And so it's so nice to see that even after she passed away, she still brings people together. And that's such a nice initiative from your department and from you, Yildiz. So thank you very much for inviting me in this very special opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much for these words as well. And I believe that your talk was a perfect fit for this occasion. Thank you. And we will get, and then this is recorded, as you know, and then once it is uploaded, I will send you a copy as well. Yeah, thank you so much. Mhm.
Thank you, and hope to visit you in some opportunity in Vancouver or to see you on one of the next ISA events. We just announced a few hours ago that the 2025 forum will take place in Rabat, Morocco. So I hope to see you, many of you there. And definitely, last time, in the last Congress, the most successful panel in terms of number was a panel Religion, Social Movements and Politics. There were over 60 proposals for one panel. So please join us in Morocco. We will definitely carry on the discussion there. Thank you.
Could you send the link for us for this event so I can post it to our participants in this talk?
Yeah, so far we just have the place and the dates.
Okay.
But I will send it to you immediately.
Lovely. Thank you so much. And take care, and we will get in touch with you a little later, maybe 5 minutes or so later via email. Or if you can stay online, Jeff, I want to.
Yes.
Okay, let's do it that way.
Yes, I'll stay, definitely. Thank you.